Well, good evening, listeners. You're listening to Lament of Hope podcast, and I am here today with Ingrid Weir. And she's in Australia, so it's morning for her, and it is evening for me. She's already in my tomorrow, actually, which is kind of cool. Um, but I wanted to interview her. She's the daughter of Peter Weir, who's a very famous director. He's done some pretty I would say thought-provoking films. He's done Dead Poets Society. He did Master and Commander, The Truman Show, Gallipoli, which is one of my favorite films, actually. For those of you who are listening to this, when this is published, the Mark Lee interview would have already come out, and he was the star of Gallipoli.
Mm.
And I was just researching, his work, and I came across his daughter Ingrid, and she has this beautiful website. And she does photography and interior design. She's done costume design. She was the graphic designer for Master and Commander. But she also was talking about how she traveled the world with her dad. And I thought that was such a unique experience. And I've always wondered, what is it like on the other side of the camera? Yes, for the director, but also for their families and just the intense workload and all that stuff. But what's so cool, she's done so many things. She's worked in theater, she's worked in film, she's worked in buildings and different types of performance settings and just a whole bunch of design. And so that's like her world. And she's written a couple books as well. I'll have her link to her website so you can check it out and read her bio in detail. Um, but Ingrid, thank you so much for taking the time to be on the show.
Oh, my pleasure. My pleasure, Danielle. It's lovely, crossing the oceans to talk to you.
Yes, it's crazy how we can do that now. It's a gift. Um, I did, just to kind of start out, I wanted to ask you, what do you love about interior design and costume design? Like, what is it about that side of art that you love?
I love creating an atmosphere or going into a strong atmosphere that if it's done in a certain way and top interior design can create a kind of enchantment and it takes you like a portal to another world. This is rare. Um, I've had it happen a few times in Los Angeles. I think they very much have that theatrical sort of kind of interior design. I was lucky a couple of years ago to visit Richard Christensen's Flamingo Estate. I'm not sure if you're aware of that, but it's on a sort of hilltop, and then there's all these cactuses and little rooms, and sort of you just go into almost like a childlike world.
Hmm.
That's what I enjoy.
Is it just like, so the imaginativeness of it, that there's no rules in particular or anything like that? Or do you think that with interior design, there are certain rules that you kind of have to stay in for it to still be considered like beautiful and because some people I've talked to, beauty doesn't really have a definition. It's kind of obviously it's in the eye of the beholder in some ways. But for artists, for many of them, there is like, this is what makes a good story. This is what makes a good. So there are still some basic outlines and rules that they follow. And
Mhm.
do you feel the same way about art in that sense, or?
Interesting question. I follow my instinct a lot,
Okay.
but I do remember doing a photography course, and it was the second course, and the woman said to us, I'm going to teach you the rules of photography. And I thought, oh, I don't know if I want to know the rules. Like there's something, does that make you too confined? But it was a wonderful course because she taught us the rules and then she said you can always break them. And take photography to use as an example, define example. If there's a thing called frame within a frame. So if you take a shot of through a window, people often get drawn into that. There's also the rule of thirds. If you slice the photo in that way, it's very pleasing to the viewer.
Hmm.
So there are rules. I think it's good to know there are in interior design rules. And then you get to that other thing where it's like you go beyond the rules and put a personal stamp on it.
Do you have a particular medium you enjoy most? Because you've done so many things. Is there one particular you think you gravitate toward easier than others?
I've always worked in visuals, visual media, and the last few months I've taken a break from visual media, which I've been in my whole life. And as I mentioned earlier, I've been writing a novel. Um, when I was at art school, I remember a tutor saying, in some ways, writing is the most visual of all mediums because you're creating a visual in people's mind. So I've been completely enjoying that. And parallel to the visual question is that we're all facing with the entry of AI onto the visual scene. What does that mean for visuals now? How are we going to react to them? And so I've enjoyed having a little break, but I'm also looking forward to getting back to it.
Yeah, how do you feel about because I mean, I've just for fun, because like you can go into Chat GBT or whatever it is and you type in this image and you can keep on editing it and editing it and editing it until it's like crazy and wild. But sometimes, like, I even just for fun did a picture of myself and like described, okay, this is what I want in it. Here's my cat, all this. And the picture came back and it looked a lot like me. Like, it was startlingly really crazy. Like, and I actually liked it. I was like, you know what? That might be the best picture of me that I have. Um, and I wanted to ask you because I know, some people that I've talked to are very afraid of it and they think it's going to, take over the world and eventually it's going to be drastically different. And then I've interviewed some people where they have an AI companion that they talk to and has actually become their friend, for your years now. Um,
Mm.
and so I wonder for you, like, do you think AI coming into the graphic design world or into the photography world is going to be a bad thing? Or do you like it? Do you actually enjoy the enhancing it's doing?
Um, my instinctive thing is to not like it.
Yeah.
I like the handcrafted, the handmade, the mistakes. Um, However, I do like being open to new and change. And I think that's, there's certain currents that you go along, and I've been keeping my eye on it. Someone who I admire very much in the interior design world is Kelly Wersler, and big studio in Los Angeles. She has embraced it as a member of the team. And I find that very interesting. And so I think it's possibly going to be good for our world if there can be amazing medical discoveries. I just query machines in the creative world and what creativity is. I don't quite see how that links up.
Hmm. Yeah, and explain that a little more. Do you mean by the fact that machines can't necessarily be creative because it's programmed already and there's certain things that they're gonna do?
Well, they're using other people's work. I guess I get into that, and they've been fed a lot of rooms and designs and looks and everything, and it is based on. I know what it's like to do a room. It's a lot of work, so it seems almost not say unfair. I I guess where I would see it working in design is that they think differently. They don't have our own innate sort of likes, prejudices, ways of thinking. So when I see Kelly Wersler using it, I would say she's using it to come in with a completely different point of view,
Right.
and I can see value in that. I look at Pinterest a lot. A lot of AI interiors are coming through. Um, I would say your eye gets used to them very quickly.
Yes.
So there's not an unexpected thing. So I think, yeah, going forward, there will be around. But I also believe that when something like that comes in, the handmade and authentic gets more precious. Not for everyone. A lot of people like the AI, but for people who care about it, it will be more important. And I think what human touched work has is a warmth to it, which I don't think you can get in an AI interior.
That's true.
Mm.
I was gonna ask you, when you were saying it's a lot of work, if you're designing a room, how long does that take?
Well, it can be endless. I, coming from the set and film set world, I like having a deadline because it kind of pushes you towards energy and then you create it. But I think the room you live in, I mean, definitely for me, I'm constantly adjusting. And we just had a big party on the weekend and we kind of rearranged the whole house and decorated it. So, I see it as a place of creativity and playfulness as well.
For a movie set, what did you find one in particular that was really challenging to make that you just found either you had a block about what to do or it just wasn't fitting the way you'd imagined it would?
Well, I was very fortunate to work on a lot of period films. And so what you do with that, you do a lot of research into that period, say Master and Commander, 1805, military warfare and botany, and you just get immersed in that world. So you're following little clues along the path. I think when you do an interior for a house contemporary, there's so many options you can do. And that's
Yeah.
where people get sort of stuck. They're like, oh, I love houses in the country, but then I also like a modern thing. And so then how do they go together? And that's when you can get the overwhelm.
Did you, when you're talking about, period pieces, one thing I'm finding in newer period pieces, some of them are really good at sticking to the time period, in dialogue and in costumes and all of that. But in others, they're not. And I'm
Mm,
finding that they're kind of taking some modern things, they're putting them in there, and even costume wise. And
mm,
I find that, I mean, sure, maybe it looks neat or cool or however you want to put it, but for me, it's like, but that's not how the time period would be. So that's really distracting. For
mm.
you, like when you're watching a period film, is that the first thing you're looking at is the costumes? Is it hard for you if the costumes aren't realistic to the time period?
It can be. But then, if you're saying you're just going to go for it and make a kind of mash up in a way, that's you're making your own rules. But yes, I love seeing something where you get a feeling of the time. It's I just watched incredible Wolf Hall. I don't know if you've seen that, but so they shot in real Tudor houses with the sort of, and you look at the gardens and then the sort of carved wood and the clothes, and I mean, yeah, I very much enjoy that. Very much been
Is,
taken into another time.
yeah, no, I agree with you. I love the architecture from like the Victorian era and I don't know. The modern look is I like some of the modern house looks, but a lot of times they look really cold. And so when you walk in, you feel cold, even if it's
Mm,
not cold, but it's just everything's very edgy and super simplistic and also just really basic colors, black and white.
yeah.
There's not a lot of color going on in the sense of yeah, vibrancy. It kind of feels like a cubicle of sorts, but it's like
Mm,
spacious.
mm.
Um, do you like what's your ideal type of home? Like what do you if you could make I mean obviously you live in your own home, but if you could make your ideal home, what would it look like if someone was to like walk into it? How would you design it?
Um, I like the word cozy a lot. I think cozies. I had a dear friend who's an actor, Australian actor called Damon Herriman. He is living in Sydney between here and Los Angeles, and his house, he got a modern architect came in and did it, redid the house. And he came to me and he said, I've lost something. I want it to be cozy. And so I came on and redecorated the house. I think there's something too I've been thinking about recently. I like it when there's a little bit of a loose feeling too. Um, A friend of mine once said he liked coming over. He thought he could take his shoes off and then go and see what was in the fridge. And I think there's something nice about that. It's not like people coming and saying, "Oh, I've got to be on my best behavior." And so, if you're doing that, I think that's where vintage can be good. And things that have a bit of patina, a little bit beaten up. But then, apart from that, what I do notice is, I mean, for me, fabrics are so key. Fabrics, luscious fabrics, patterned fabrics, texture. Texture is huge. I think texture gives real excitement to a room. And the other thing that I'm big on is lighting. Lighting really creates a mood, and lamps, and then I'm just exploring a bit more. It's not something I've ever really worked with, but the use of mirror and what that can do to sort of give a spark, a sort of an interesting shape to a room.
Hmm. So how would you make a room that's sad?
I'd say instantly no texture and no color and hard surfaces.
So just, and when you mean no texture, you mean like no sort of, is text, forgive me because I don't really know the difference. Is texture meaning no fabric? No.
Texture is so. I think I'll just can show you this. Like for example, this chair I have has a
Mm-hmm.
texture. The basket, the sort of weaving. Rather, if it was just leather, it wouldn't have that. Raffia straw shells for cushions, velvet cushions. So it's all different. It's not just one kind of texture. It's a
So,
big thing to do texture.
so it'd just be like a very, so no design, just very simple, plain.
As you say that, then I'm imagining some amazing room of concrete that an architect's done that's incredibly beautiful. So, look, it does get down to no rules. I think we can all see when a space is loved, and that can be even as much as putting some flowers in, making it clean. And then to me, it doesn't matter what style it is. If someone loves the space, you can see it in the space.
I want to ask you, it's so interesting. If someone is more fearful of hospitality, for instance, is that something you could tell when you would walk into a home by the way it looked? If somebody was very, because even I've struggled with this, is like I love my home to be very clean. And
Mm-hmm.
even my husband has told me at times, and he's helped me where he's like, just leave the books on the table. You don't have to always put them back on the shelf, just so that we feel like someone lives here. But for me, it's like, no, I like to put everything in the shelf, but then when you walk in, everything is pristine in the sense of like angled and everything, and it, you know, bothers me when stuff's out of place and all this, but I've started laxing on that because I've noticed, well, it doesn't look as friendly when people walk in. And I've seen
Mm-hmm.
even doing some events or, hospitality is not a gift of mine. It's something I kind of have to grow in. People are instantly on guard if they see you like always cleaning up or putting things away
Yes.
or spacing it and they you can see that they become less comfortable. Um,
Mm.
so I wonder like do you think there is a way like when you walk into a home you can tell that the home is not like you're uncomfortable doing much in the house because you don't want to mess it up at all?
Well, it's funny you ask that because we just had a big party on the weekend to celebrate the winter solstice. And I think what's happened, we always used to have parties, my husband and I, but COVID kind of disrupted that. So we haven't had a big party in some years. And I think maybe people have become a little bit more insular in the home, but there's something about having a lot of people through your house and a kind of joyous atmosphere. I believe it goes into the house and you sort of can feel it in the house. So what I did was I went back and read an article of a very famous hostess in the 1930s called Elsa Maxwell for her
Hmm.
tips on having a party. And it was so interesting. And her tips were to have the party in one room, to have slightly too many people in for the room, and to have it well lit, And then when people come in, that there's a bit of noise going on. But she said the big thing is for the hostess to look relaxed. So I think that's people take cues from you that you're sort of like, this is going to be a great party.
That is, how do you be a hostess and be relaxed?
Wow. A couple of glasses of wine can help at it. No, I think you should. I think it's a lovely thing to host people. I really think it's something I treasure. I like doing it, and I treasure friends who do it. And not everyone wants to do it because it is a bit of having people into your house. But I love it because there's something just kind of like about enjoying life. And a lot of our society is very transactional. And I think to have a party and friends over and chatting, it just kind of um, it creates a warmth.
Yeah, no, you're right. And it's interesting because I wanted to ask you, because since you've worked on period pieces, and I mean, you've just seen so many different types of architecture and ways that
Mm.
rooms have been done. Do you see like a difference as the time has gone on in the way that we make our homes and the way that we style our houses and the way that we what kind of fabrics, what kind of textures, what kind of designs we favor, how it's changed? Have you noticed any sort of like, oh, in this period this was very much this and now we're here? Does that reflect the culture in any way, do you think?
Oh, 100%. Like, I think if you look back to something like Victoriana, dark rooms, heavy textures, heavy fabrics, and then you go into the 1920s, I think famous to designer Siri Morn did an all white room that was astonishing. And a big difference I'd pull in there is post World War II, because I think the houses they were made a bit cheaper, not quite as well crafted.
Hmm.
I think what with current taste now, um, you do see a lot of white rooms, and it is because of resale as well. If you make the house very personal and do sort of pink cabinets and stuff, it is harder to resell. And so you do see that it's a kind of standard good taste look.
Hmm.
Um, in terms of current trends, I think you're seeing some interesting nods coming into Art Deco again. A designer in New York, I like Athena Calderone. She's sort of doing a New York apartment up with that look, which can be sort of elegant and lush and a bit. And I think in a bit like beyond the white room.
Do you think, do you prefer a certain period more than another when it comes to architecture, design?
I've got a real soft spot for the like Spanish revival in California. I think there's something. I think maybe I was a little girl when I first saw it, but there's something about little turrets and fairy tale houses and big chandeliers and courtyards and mosaics and fountains. I do love that style.
Well, I want to ask you, I mean, this is going to be weird, but before we were discussing this, you mentioned, in your younger years desiring children, and now, that just wasn't in the cards for your life. But I, do you, I've always wondered, when parents put together nurseries and rooms for children, I've seen so many different types. You have some that
Mm,
are really minimalistic. Then you have others that have like all this wallpaper and all these beautiful, like imaginative
yes.
scenes about. Um, and then some are just really dark, because they really want whenever they put their child down, it's very much like it's the only place where they want them to sleep, and so it's not really a place of decor. It's just a darker room. And I've wondered, is that I don't know if this is a weird question, but I've always wondered like I don't know. Do you think in your experience with rooms, if there is like a better way to do a room for someone that's going to be in that room for a long time is it better to be more colorful and imaginative, to have more textures and designs than it is to be more minimalistic for even young people? Or is it does that not really affect anything, do you think? Because I was just wondering, because I know there's, even as an adult, if I walk into certain rooms, they give me certain moods or kind of encourage a certain mood, which is really incredible how powerful that is. But I just wondered, even from a child's perspective, if you think there's a better way or a way that is more encouraging to a child, depending on what type of room they're in.
Yes, I worked with a friend doing a child's nursery in Brooklyn, the friend I mentioned before, and we got a terrific wallpaper from Anthropology, I believe, which was black and white, and it was jungle and little lions and I don't know, some chimpanzees or something. And the child's parents are both writers, so I knew they'd be able to like look at the wallpaper and make little stories up out of it. So I think there's a lovely playful aspect that you can see there. I mean, it's tricky with interior design because it does get very expensive. That is something I struggle with sometimes. So it's like, how do you get a room being inviting younger people when you know it has a bit of wear and tear? I mean, I do believe that buying quality over quantity with your big items like sofas and chairs and tables, I think it is worth it. But if you're saying you want the room to feel good, younger people, how do they do it? Cushions are incredible, rugs, lamps, and then leaves and flowers. That will give you a lot. Candles.
Hmm.
Um, And so I think that's good to keep in mind. And you can even do it by going to IKEA or getting stuff on Etsy and that's where, as much as I love using different color palettes, one thing is if you keep a fairly neutral color palette but you use a lot of texture, as we said before, the texture will make it feel more exciting. Um, but the neutral color palette will be quite calming. And that's a scheme that can really work.
How did you start liking that? Because I feel like you have to have an eye for that. Is that just something when you were younger you realized that you cared a lot about how the room looked? Or like how did you know that this was something? Because like everything you're talking about, I don't ever think about that. You know? And so
Oh,
like if you came to my house, I'd be very worried that you would look around and be like, "Oh my goodness, there's no texture in this place."
yeah.
But just like it's not something that I think about. And
Yeah,
so
yeah, yeah,
I was like, where
yeah.
have you where did it come from that you're like, wow, this is what you think about is all of these colors and textures and how a room feels and how did that happen?
Well, it's interesting you say that, and I have to go back to I was brought up in it. My mother did a lot of costumes and sets for my father's films. So, I was like a little 12-year-old girl, and we're going out to flea markets in Pennsylvania looking at things for witness, and looking at colors and what they're wearing and antiques and looking at should hold up fabrics and look at it. And so it really was, it's just like DNA kind of things. And then you can imagine being a young child and going onto a set. I was often an extra, would dress up and be a little extra. I was in Mark Lee's little sister in Gallipoli. They're
Oh
reading
wow,
a
that was you.
Yes, up there with a dog and patting the dog, listening to Bill Kerr read Mowgli, which was very, very affecting to a 7-year-old. But so that wonderful, playful, enchanted, that they were part of my fabric growing up. So it's just something I've always been aware of. And so to break down and try and describe how I see things, it's kind of an interesting challenge to me because it's just something that's there.
Yeah, no, that's an did you when you started out though, because did you ever want to just act? Did you ever feel, because a lot of children that I've talked to whose parents were actors, they would try to do some acting, or like that would be kind of the trajectory they would go into. But for
Mhm.
you, it was much more the behind the scenes, the artistic side of it. Is that, did you ever have a phase where you wanted to try being on camera and doing things like that, or was it just never an interest?
No, that didn't come up for me. I just didn't think of myself as an on-camera person, but I liked the creative world. I like being with other people and the buzz you get and all doing something a bit gypsy, or something being creative, people having jokes. My father was known and is known for having very good atmosphere on sets. He was very encouraging and open, but strong command of them. But they were just so much fun. And so I loved that a creative group coming together. Now, I think what's happened now, that's much rarer than it used to be, that creative group bounce. While we have something wonderful like this, we can connect, podcasts and Substacks I love, but it's like creatives are more in their own little zones, doing their own thing, not like, say, if in the past you'd have a magazine where everyone goes in to work on the magazine. Now they're all at home
Yes,
doing different Substacks. Mm.
that's true. And I mean, that's probably the same for film, right? Now, you wouldn't necessarily, if you're working on costumes, would you really be on set that much, or would you be working somewhere else now, doing the costumes and kind of seeing, would it be more separate, you think, from the set than it was when you were doing it?
Do you know what I noticed a difference? And this is, going back, I really noticed when mobile phones, say around 2007, where, the iPhone coming out, I felt that made a real difference on film sets because you'd go in and all the extras would be looking at it and everyone looking at it. Before, people were just hanging around chatting. And I noticed that difference, like, in so many different areas.
Yeah. Is that, how do you feel about that from, because I mean, you grew up without iPhones, whereas I
Yeah.
grew
Yeah.
up and I don't
Yes.
remember a world where there were no phones. Like, I
Yeah.
know, I don't think there was an iPhone when I was a kid, but still,
Mm.
my parents had phones. And we would
Yeah.
always be fascinated, it'd be like, Mom, Dad, please let us see your phone so we can play on it.
Mm.
So I don't know a world where there wasn't internet or phones. Um, do you miss that there wasn't, like, did you prefer when there wasn't? I mean, obviously, yeah, you're right, there's some good things that have happened. Like, we wouldn't be able to do this, but um,
Yeah.
do you miss it how it was before without all the technology?
I'm not nostalgic. I don't miss things because there's good and bad at every time. I really believe that. I do love it when people come together and hang out. I think that's increasingly precious, and I think a lot of people are recognizing that, in parties, in groups, and I think it's almost healthy to have time face to face without looking at each other through glass screens. Definitely like the Instagram world, where you're seeing these edited highlights of people's life, and it can be a little um, alienating sometimes, because it's a strange way to interact when you think about it.
No, you're right, it is. And what's weird, I was even thinking about it just today, is that a lot of times whatever is on the social media of whatever it is kind of affects how I feel for the day.
Yeah.
So if I open up my phone in the morning and I'm seeing a lot of happy things, then I feel relatively calm. But then at the same time, the same thing could happen the next day, and I might start feeling envious because if I'm looking through all of it,
Mhm.
everyone looks really happy and good. Or
Yeah.
if I happen to open it and there's a lot of bad stuff that's just getting highlighted for some reason, then I feel like the world is ending. Like I'm seriously
Yeah.
afraid. And
Yep.
it's sometimes I'm just, and I know, it's up to you to control that and how much you're engaging with that, and it's not, I don't like to say, okay, it's the fault of this or whatever, because honestly, you're your own person and you can be self-disciplined and you can, if you really want to, you can do it. But it's crazy because even just the generation after me, like it's impossible. Like it's like 5-year-olds have their phones, and when you're
Mm.
trying to have a good conversation or just a creative one, I have been so surprised when a 5-year-old will walk up to me and say, "Hi, my name's whatever. What's your name?" That rarely happens, and when it does happen, I don't know what to say. Like I'm kind of like, my name's Danielle." Like you're so taken aback because
Yeah,
normally
you're
nobody
absolutely right.
talks to
Yes,
you.
yeah, it's so true. Um, yeah, look, I think we are all dealing with this, aren't we? I struggle with, I get pulled into the phone like anyone. Um, Particularly visuals, I respond to them. I just read a really interesting book by a young neuroscientist who is a digital native. He grew up with phones, 27, something like that. And so he wrote this book. It's called The Dose Effect, DOSE. It's about dopamine, oxytocin, endorphins, and serotonin. And he basically describes how they work in our mind. But he says, look, dopamine is the one that can be hacked. And so there are very, very clever people on trying to get us addicted to phones, and they can do something with it. And so he has little techniques about kind of how to, you know, refute that. And a big one he does, he says, is to not look at the phone for an hour in the morning. He said that's pretty huge if you can do that. And of course, I've tried that and it's good. And then you have all these good habits, and then you can just slide back into looking at it all the time. So yeah, it's a constant thing, really.
I was gonna ask you, when you're sad or feeling kind of low, what's your
Yeah.
go-to thing to do?
Hmm. Interesting.
Like maybe not
Um,
the most healthy thing, because honestly, a lot of times the way we cope is not. But
yeah.
if you're honest with yourself, like what's the first thing you're like, this is what I would like to do because I can at least this is comfortable for me when I'm sad.
Well, it's easy to internet scroll. That's
Yeah,
very
isn't
easy.
it?
Go online and just go, I like it better when I just push myself to go to a Pilates class and I feel better after that, or a swim in the ocean. But you need to do that little bit of action and then you feel better. Whereas the passivity of looking at phones or computers is it's so available and it's so easy and it promises a sort of calming, soothing thing. Um, I also like puzzles. I like Sudoku. I think it's funny that can just sort of get your brain into a little thing, and and then there's all lovely things like cooking and gardening and stuff like that. That
Yeah,
that, that
no.
you know what makes you feel better, and you know what makes you feel worse. But sometimes it's easier just to do that.
Well, it's
Mm,
interesting because when you were talking earlier about like the AI and how you're right in the sense that like with phones and things are more immediate, right, for us. And so, you quickly can just keep going and going, going, and then it's not enough,
mm,
so you need more time, all this. But
mm,
even when I was thinking about you talking about how you create a room, it takes work, but when you're done with it and you've created it, it's so satisfying. And I feel like the satisfaction lasts longer because you can look back on it, you can see it, you can walk into it. And there's just all that you've done and all of this hard work, and you can be so gratified by that. And even when you're mentioning like taking a swim or going to a Pilates class, like it's discipline to do those
yeah,
things, but when you do them, you're much more happy that you've done the hard
yes,
work and gotten to the reward.
mm,
Whereas with, internet and other things, it feels like a reward, but it isn't. It's really quick to go away. And it's just
mm,
really interesting how I feel like, especially with your work, you get to have this element of human life where you get to experience what it's like to work on a project for a long time and then go,
mm,
wow, that's what I got to do that and look at how beautiful that turned out as compared to me.
mm,
Or, you go in the chat GPT and you're like, I want this really dark room that makes sad. And then something comes out and you're like, wow, that's cool. I'm very creative.
yeah,
It's not really the same
yeah,
thing.
yeah. Well, the book I mentioned of the neuroscientist, he actually tracks that. And he said it's dopamine. That in the past, say, when we were cave people, we our brain would release dopamine when we made a fire. So all the work making a fire and doing it, and then you have a fire and you feel good. similar to you saying about doing a room, you do all this effort and work, and it's this sort of slow release of dopamine, lovely sort of hump up and down. And he said the way they've hacked it on the phones is you go in and you get a little bing, bing, like quite high bit of dopamine. But because your brain, the pleasure and pain are quite close together, apparently. So you get that, your baseline, quick hit, cheap dopamine from the phone, and then you get the equal and opposite down. It's
Yeah.
like your brain regulating it. I mean, I'm sure he would describe it better, but I find it helpful reading about that to know it's an actual kind of chemical release in the brain.
Yeah, no, you're right, it is. And we are in a society though where we're just craving that
Mm,
dopamine. Um,
mm.
because I want to ask you, I mean, and this is not to offensively say you're older, but obviously you are older than me. And
Yeah.
so I've wondered, with my generation, we've struggled so much, I've noticed, with lots of discomfort, discontent. We're not very grateful. We're very quick to be like, we'll have like something really fun happen and then it will be done and then we'll be sad again and then we need that fun thing to happen again and it just goes up and down, up and down. You're constantly fighting this up and down. But I've noticed with the older generation, like even my husband's parents, they don't have that. There's like they're very content with where they are in life, even if I think, oh, well, you haven't accomplished this or you haven't done this. But to them, that's not how they don't see the world that way. It's interesting how the older generation seems much more, obviously, it causes a disconnect, which is hard because then you have this miscommunication and it's hard to connect. But at the same time, it seems like the older generation doesn't have this frenzy that they're constantly in this riff, whereas these younger people, we're constantly all over the place, and we're not comfortable. And I just
Mm.
wonder, why do you think that is? Like, is there something, do you think, in your time in the older generation that gave you guys a more stable view of life, or just you knew what you were supposed to be doing? Whereas now, like, we're just really young people are just all over, and there's just not much of a pathway that they're on. But I've seen with the older generation, they do seem more content, even with changing times. Like they just stick to what they know and what they love and what they've been doing. And I don't know why that is. Is there, I don't know, do you have thoughts on that at all? Because I've just noticed that with the people I've interviewed who are older compared to the people I've interviewed who are younger.
Um, I don't want to burst the bubble. this, I look. I think there's a lot of discomfort and happiness amongst my generation. Um, I, I mean, I'd say part of it maybe is the human condition. Um, but I find your view interesting because you are interviewing across the generations. Um, I would say that in my circle of friends, there's a lot of people working in design, in music, acting. And I think that world is being squeezed right now. So there's a lot of tension and discomfort there. And I'm not
Okay.
sure whether the people you talk to younger are feeling the same thing. Um, so I'd say take a path in advertising. Advertising's always been a tough game, always a younger person's game. I know a few people who've gone through very successfully, but I think it's less stable than ever. So it's sort of, I would say, younger generations are dealing with more unstable structures, perhaps. Um, and then, as we were saying before, there's this catch and release of dopamine stuff happening all the time and comparison with others. And I see that as well. I do feel fortunate that I knew a world before online. And I've other friends of mine have said, "Oh, isn't it good we had that?" Because just being younger, you just played and you were more insular. You had a smaller world. It was just sort of a couple of friends, and then at uni, it was just your friends, and you did things. You weren't thinking of someone doing something in New York. You just didn't think about it.
Yeah, that's
It's
true.
you. So, and I think where the tough thing is, if you're here and doing something and you look at someone from New York who's doing something extraordinary, and they might have a team of 12 people, you could think, oh, I'm not as good as that. It's that there's more comparison as well. And I think that's tricky. I mean, what
That,
would you put it down to? Do you have a feeling about it?
I mean, and I'll say this because I mean, it's me, my podcast, right? But
Yeah.
I personally, I think homes are much more broken now. There's
Mm-hmm.
not family structure really as like maybe, and I don't want to, I think there has always been trauma and pain since the beginning of time. But
Mm-hmm.
there was still, I think, more of a moral compass where it was like, okay, what's the right thing to do? And that's what I will do.
Yes. Yeah.
Whereas now we just do what we want to do. And
Mm-hmm.
the problem with that is that it's not, your wants are not always bad, but maybe the timing is wrong or the want is wrong or the situation. And
Mm-hmm.
we don't think about it, we just do it because that's what we want to do. But the problem is it causes pain and suffering and hurt for so many people around you. Because you're in a world, yes, it's you, but you affect a whole bunch of people. And so there has to
Yes.
be that balance of, okay, I have to have boundaries of for myself of things that I need to grow in and things that I need to pursue, even if other people around me don't want me to. You need to, why don't they want me to? Is it an unhealthy reason? Are they trying to control my actions? That's not good. But are you purposely just trying to live your life regardless of the circumstances? And what's happening is then you have kids growing up watching parents do that and then doing the same thing. You know what I mean? And
Mm.
I feel like that brokenness and confusion then causes a lot more. There's no one to turn to. There's no one to ask about, if you're a 13-year-old girl, you don't have a father, right? You start dating for the first time.
Mm.
What's the guy supposed to be like? You don't know. Or if your mother and father, because they're working so hard to provide and they're not home a lot, then who are you looking up to ask for life questions? And when you're like struggling with a worry, or if you're having an argument with a friend, or a friend has told you something, there's no one to ask. Whereas before, like you said, there's a difference in that, like, you did have a smaller world in a sense, and there's also problems with that, right? Because then
Yes.
you can be too insulated. But at the same time, you didn't have so many choices that you could get
Yes.
so easily confused.
Yeah.
And we have tons,
Yes.
tons of choices. And I think it's kind of scary, because then there's just not, it's like, what do I do with my life? And I guess
Yeah.
that crisis to me doesn't feel like something that the older generation had as intensely because there was just the way you would do it, you know?
I think so. I'm Gen X, and I think we're in between, possibly, because I think the baby boomer can have a real moral compass. I think what you're describing is very interesting, and I've seen it also in my generation, which is very self absorbed. And then something I've come to value is consistency over charm. And,
Hmm.
being in the movie industry, I've seen a lot of charm, but there's something about consistency and like someone who shows up, someone who turns up, who is there for you. And then that creates trust. And I just see trust now as more important than ever because trust is that someone won't judge you, that they'll be there for you. And then that's how things grow to me is really trust. Um, I mean, also I think when I was younger, I was a lot more careless of people and I was more self-centered. But I think in midlife, something I do feel is a positive is that I've come to see people as more precious. They're very more valuable.
Yeah. What made that switch for you? Was it just you think getting older? Or was there something that was there an event in your life that made you value people more?
No, I think it's going down the path of life, and it's a very interesting process because I keep in touch with a lot of old friends or see people doing things, and some people thrive, and others can just get into quite a kind of almost circular pattern and can't move through things. And it's fascinating to me people who adapt and change with the times.
What is the hardest change you've had to adapt to, you think, from when you were younger to now?
Hmm. How does change? I'd almost say right now, because I just feel right now is post COVID, I'll call it. I think somehow during COVID, the chessboard was turned over and we're just putting the pieces back. And so much has changed since COVID. And I don't even know how it's all changed. And sort of piecing it together, I feel relationships, work, politics, AI, there's so much change. And so it's a real, I would say what I would like to do, and you're used to the word hope. I'd like to keep a sense of hope and adapt with the times, but also keep my sense of self and how I like to be in the world as well. So you don't lose that just being the current way. And yeah, I think we're all facing a challenging time.
Yeah. How do you hold on to hope? Where do you find that for you?
Um, I have, this is so simple, but we have this adorable little dog, Bobo, and to me, there's something about dogs and going to dog parks and how they interact and their sort of self-interestedness, but then a sort of lovely, thing. I do see that a lot. And then, of course, friends. I think beauty's gone out of our world a bit. I think a lot of arts goes more for the shock than for beauty, but I think beauty is an important part of our world, um, possibly seen now more in nature. But then you see people lining up to go into a Cezanne or Van Gogh exhibition.
Yeah. No, I agree with you. It's interesting how many people I've talked to who say that nature. I was just talking to someone the other day who said, like, the way that they find the most peace in the world is when they can just go into nature totally
Yeah.
alone and think. And
Mm.
there's nothing else they said that compares to that in the sense of peace and to quiet down all the voices. And then another lady I talked to, she's like, I just dance in the meadows. Like I find an empty meadow and I just
Yeah.
dance around. And it was like, what is it about the simplicity of the beauty of, because obviously, the earth is so beautiful, it's complicated, but it's also so simple in its beauty in a way.
Yeah.
And it
Yeah.
just doesn't grow old for people, no matter what generation, no matter where
Mm.
you are. Nature is always something that catches the eye of everybody. As soon as they're able to see something beautiful, waterfall, just hearing the patter of rain, like sometimes it's just so interesting to me how that comes up so much. That nature for people, when they think of beauty, they think of the natural world.
I completely agree. And I also think, referring back a bit, that we're just being sold to all the time. People are selling stuff, and then sometimes it's not revealed they're selling, but we work it out. But a tree isn't selling you anything, you know, you're not being manipulated or sold to. So I think that being in nature, you're not having those pressures come on you as well, apart from the beauty. And I think human beings do love beauty and are attracted towards it, but beauty's also being used to sell to us as well. So it's this funny little zone we're in. But I mean, why did you choose this name for your podcast? So is that a guiding thing for you? I hope.
It's interesting. I think, I mean, personally, I've had a really hard life. So I grew up really quickly.
Hmm.
And I remember so many days as a young person sitting on my floor and just crying. And I was like
Mm,
asking God, why is this bad things happening and why is the world so cruel and why are things so painful? And as I grew up and was able, by God's grace, through counselors, different people in my life, to work through some of that hardship, I started realizing what makes life beautiful for me, because I'm a Christian, is I do believe in a creator, but also he has made people, and every person I have interacted with has something beautiful about them. So no matter how hard
mm,
life is, God has made everyone beautiful, and there's something so unique and beautiful about them. And so even, and I'll say this for me, what's so hard about the times we're living in is it doesn't matter anymore about people. People don't matter. What matters is money. What matters is what's most convenient. What matters is how quickly can I get across what I want to say? How quickly can I skip your story so that I can tell
mm,
my narrative and then we can be done? And I kept thinking, whenever I read scripture, Jesus would always take so much time to talk to people, whoever they were. And I was like, what makes life beautiful is that I get to talk to you. I get to connect with you, and I don't have to, like you said, I get to hear your story. I get to look at your tree, whatever your life is.
mm.
And I get to sit back and listen to that and hear that and interact with you, and we can talk. And I thought the reason why I made the podcast and named it that is it's like that is what life is about, right? There's this beauty in this
Yeah,
conversation, and we're missing it with the phones, with the change in times. And that's why I was so interested by your love of a room, because the fact that you would take so much time just to make a room beautiful. I mean, like, how amazing is that? Like, there isn't an AI generator that I could talk to that was going to tell me in detail how beautiful and how much thought they put into the room and the creativity and the personality. I mean, there are houses that were made for people that when you walk in them, it's the exact same personality of the person that lived there for years and it didn't change. And like,
mm,
how do you, there's no one like a human being that can do that. You know what I mean? There's just nothing that replaces that. And the fact that there is life like that, there has to be hope, you know? And I think I'm sad that our world is losing that. And we're just so, and like you said earlier too, and I'm guilty of this, we become so self-absorbed. And then it's like, we're not talking to people, we're not getting out there, we're not sharing our struggles with people, or we're trying to be trendy, which is hard because, like, even in the podcast industry, if I say something that may be offensive, maybe I'll lose a follower or somebody's going to say something nasty about me or whatever. Or for you, if you, have a specific way that you like to make a room or you have a worldview of how you make a room and it doesn't agree with another person and they slam you down and they're like, well, you're just a terrible person. That's really
mm.
hard to hear. You're like, that's hurtful and it does
Yeah,
affect you. And I guess it's just that was a really long rant. But point being is that these are the moments I think when you can just see such beauty in what God has made and in people. And I think that's the beauty of life, really.
yeah. I'm sorry to hear of your young child crying. That's very touching, and that you've done so much work to get through that. That's a wonderful. I admire that. I really admire that. Um, I guess whilst I do interior design, for me, there's a room. I'm more interested in people and how people can be, what the room does for people, and how people come together. And it's interesting. There's a little courtyard here. We've got a fire pit, and so it's really interesting. Something like this is where, even for me, my work expands beyond rooms. Is say something like the fire. Fire's so potent, and if you have people sitting around a fire, just chatting or roasting stuff, like there is a real connection. I think there's something about being all around, looking at something elemental, talking, and so I like interiors and experiences that do promote connection, and that's podcasts. Why is everyone going really interested in podcasts? Because I was describing it to my mother. I said it's not this sort of thing in the media which we all know about, which is like controversy and like you and this and like this kind of like heads butting. I said it's
Yes.
much more connecting, and I find that it's really interesting. I think people will always crave it. I think the more you get, machine stuff, and that will go on. But I think I believe that. I just think people will always love to connect.
I agree. Well, I have to ask you, Ingrid, just one more question. I want to be respectful of your time. If you had to say your personality and how a room looked, if
Yeah.
someone created a room and said, "This is Ingrid," what
Yes.
would that look like?
Yeah, well, I'm quite adventurous and like traveling and art, so there'd probably be some art and travel. I love just look at some beautiful orchids. I love flowers. I like a little dog, and then I can also be quite lazy and have just lying around reading on a comfy sofa. So I like that. A fire, and space for friends and family as well.
So lots of textures.
Lots of textures. Yeah.
Well, Ingrid, it's been such a gift to talk with you, and I am excited. I know your novel is still really early in the stages, but whenever it does come out, I'm excited for that. And I think it's just fascinating. And I want to say, just your website, I mean, just as a design thing, is one of the prettiest websites I had seen. And
Oh,
that was one reason why, as weird
yeah.
as this sounds, I wanted to read more of your website because it was so pretty. And I was like,
Oh,
this lady knows how to design stuff. She must be
yeah.
interesting.
Yeah. Well, it's funny. What I'm exploring in my novel, it is about an interior designer whose life implodes, in Los Angeles. But it's a lot about her trying to like make her way through the world and what's real and what's illusion, what's dreams. So kind of stuff we've been talking about as well.
Perfect. Then when your novel comes out, we can do
Yep.
another one and you can tell me all about that.
We'll do that. Yeah, lovely talking to you. I've really enjoyed it.
You
Thank you
too,
for
Ingrid. Have a good day for you, and I will start getting ready for bed.
have a good sleep. See
All
you.
right,
See you.
bye.
Yeah.